Hello, I'm Stephanie Roy, and I'm the Manager of Employer Relations at the Chartered Professional Accountants of British Columbia, CPABC. Welcome to the session, Our Point of View on Diversity and Inclusion. While we are meeting on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land which we call home, wherever that might be. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, on whose traditional territory the CPABC offices are located. These are also the lands on which I am living and broadcasting from today. CPABC carries out its mission to protect the public by enforcing the highest professional and ethical standards over 38,000 CPAs in BC, as well as contributing to the advancement of public policy and to the province's economic and social development. One of the ways in which CPABC advances economic and social development is through our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, or EDI. We are committed to taking immediate and prudent steps to advance EDI, establish clear and measurable goals, and acting to implement, track, and ensure accountability. Our profession celebrates that there is strength in diversity, and CPABC focuses on continuing to enhance the attractiveness and accessibility of the CPA profession to include and to serve all of society through various initiatives like our Indigenous strategy, which strives to increase Indigenous representation in the profession. CPABC also supports EDI through our financial literacy program, which delivers free, objective financial education sessions to BC and Yukon residents of all ages. To reach more diverse audience, we have partnered with Dyslexia Canada to deliver programming for individuals with learning differences. We also offer sessions in other languages such as Mandarin and have many sessions targeted to new Canadians and youth. We are delighted to sponsor Our Point of View on Diversity and Inclusion, and we look forward to seeing you at our virtual exhibitor booth.
Tanshi, hello. My name is Dan Hurley, principal of the Hurley Martin Group and a director with the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance. I want to acknowledge with gratitude that VAIA operates on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish, Nuu-chah-nulth, and Kwakwaka'wakw peoples, and I'm speaking to you today from Gabriola Island on the unceded territories of the Snuneymuxw peoples. This panel session is called Our Point of View on Diversity and Inclusion. It is sponsored by the Chartered Professional Accountants of BC. We're joined today by Naoufel Mrini, a Senior Consultant for Leadership Development with LHH, and Jean-Luc Plante, Director of Organizational Development and Global Training with CSL Group. They will share with us their story of addressing discriminatory and non-inclusive behaviors such as gender inequality and cultural discrimination in an effort to create a more inclusive work environment. In this session, we will find out what they did to address this challenge, how they did it, what worked, and what did not. Following our presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask a few questions of our speakers. We encourage you to enter your questions in the chat function that you can find at the bottom of your screen. We also encourage you to join us for the roundtable immediately following this session, where you'll be able to have a more in-depth discussion with our presenters. So with that, I'm now pleased to welcome Naoufel and Jean-Luc to begin their presentation. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dan, and I'm happy to be with you today. So first of all, let me give you some background on my relationship with diversity and inclusion. I had the chance to get in touch with diversity and inclusion from a previous leadership roles that I had with Best Buy and Dell, and discover so many other aspects of diversity that I knew before. And in our professional day-to-day, we can see them and we need to be aware of them the best we can. So we have a great reaction. Also, my previous experience in Dell as an L&D regional manager for Africa, Middle East, Turkey, and Russia, opened my mind and give me the opportunity to work in different cultures and realize that companies' success is very impacted by their openness to embrace all the differences. So today, in my current role as an expert for talent and leadership development at LHH, it's a part of my purpose to continue to support client like CSL Group to build a strong D&I culture. And I want just to give a little bit about in LHH how we are working with D&I, and we believe that diverse groups make decisions, and that better decisions lead to better business results. There is a connections. And if we can see today's global market, having a diverse workforce is really fundamental to all companies' success. We need to have access to wider repertory of ideas and experiences that can help to accelerate the development of solutions that could be really adapted to what those companies' clients needs. And if we can just say it simply, it gives them a competitive advantage and make their recruitment with a better fit to their reality and their clients' needs. So today I have the pleasure to have Jean-Luc with us and to share with us what we did as a work on D&I within CSL Group. So Jean-Luc, welcome. And happy to have this conversation with you. And let's start with my first question. My first question is, can you introduce CSL Group to us?
Of course. So CSL Group is a maritime shipping company. We operate different types of ships, bulkers, self-unloaders, and different types of vessels, mainly for bulk, dry bulk cargo. We operate in different regions around the world, including Canada, the US, European, and also in Australia. So that's, I guess, in a nutshell, who CSL is. And yes, we've been very happy to collaborate with LHH as well in the past few months on how we can improve on our diversity and inclusion culture.
Super, thank you so much. And let's deep dive a little bit. And what challenges the business was facing that lead you to working with the LHH team?
So I guess there's the diversity and inclusion is not a topic that we've been talking about only for a few years. So it's been it's been around for quite a while. What started really driving action was actually 2 years ago. We did an engagement survey of all of our seafarers on board our vessels, and of course you can imagine how they are sometimes more difficult to reach with this type of initiatives because of how connectivity issue we can have on vessels and stuff like that. We got a very fair response rate to this engagement survey, and we have noticed an important, significant difference in the engagement level of men versus women on board our vessels. So that, of course, has really triggered our efforts into improving the situation. We want to create an environment where everybody on board our vessel, whether they're men, women, whatever their cultural background is, or other types of differentiator they have, everybody, we want them to be able to be happy at work, and of course to be able to deliver their best performance while they're at work. And we realize this survey was one indicator, but of course, we also hear stories. We hear our employees reaching out, and we realized that we had a bit of work to do there to make sure that our work environment, I'm talking about on board our vessels. These issues can also happen ashore, of course, but this was really our eye-opening of what's going on our vessels, and the fact that we needed to do something about it.
So and that's interesting to see that you took some data, you gathered some information, and you did your work in terms of diagnostic in what's the issue is. Now, what was the solution, and why you choose this solution?
That's an interesting question. What was the solution? I think the solution is there's so many different solutions to a challenge like that. And when I say we, I'm happy to be here today, but really I have a very, very strong support from our leadership team on that issue or that challenge, I'd say. So the leadership team, all the way to the top of our chief operational officer, our chief HR officers, even our CEOs, our CEO, they all were aligned with the fact that we needed to do something with this, the data that we had in front of us. So it was quite easy to start the action from the top. So one of the first thing we did was we reached out to our employees to get more feedback, better understand the situation, and we quickly realized that we had some work to do at the top of the pyramid. So without going into too much detail, when you work on board a ship, the chain of command is very important. So your top, we call them our top fours. These are normally our top leaders on board each vessel. We became very aware that they have a very big role to play in making sure that we create this environment, an inclusive work environment on board our vessel. So we started by wanting to train them on this. Now, training is something, as it was introduced by Dan earlier, my role is in training and development, but training is something that's not always easy, specifically on a topic like this one. So I think it starts by planting a seed of awareness and just trying to, keep it growing as much as we can. So we started to do some work with you there. You want me to go into more details of what we did?
Yeah, we want really to and have some questions that you can see here. That, like, what was presented to participants. We are interested to know how you live it there and how the participants react to that. Because we know the why, and we want to have more information about the how. In terms as an experience with the successes and the challenges of the implementation of the solutions.
Absolutely. So once a year, we have what we call our winter conference, where we invite all of our leaders on board our vessels. Again, our top 4 leaders on the vessels, our captains, our chief engineers, our chief officers, and our second engineers. So we have them all reunited into a conference every year. It's normally done live conference. This time around, the last time we did it was virtual for obvious reasons. So we had LHH come to this conference where we had all of our leaders. We're talking about approximately 150 leaders, plus all of our ashore leaders. So, right. So this sends a strong message. We don't only have our onboard leaders at the sessions, we also have all the way to the top leadership from ashore as well present at the presentation. What was presented to the participants, we went from the very, very basic of diversity and inclusion, right? So not explaining, everybody knows what diversity is, but just creating awareness around what does it really mean to have a diverse work environment? What does it really mean to have an inclusive work environment? So we had some conversation around that, but we also talked about unconscious bias. So sometimes we do at CSL have the belief that our employees do not intentionally create a non-inclusive work environment. Our people want to work in a great work environment where everybody can thrive and everybody can succeed, but sometimes their behavior might not create that type of environment, even if it's unintentional. So we thought it was really important to actually touch on some potential unconscious bias. But when you've never heard of this before, this can be a little tough to get and to actually absorb and really understand. So we had some very practical exercise that we've done with them. They were into breakout rooms. They had to sort of open up to each other about after we've given some information about that. We had some breakout rooms where they actually got to talk to each other and trying to open up and understand, do we have these biases on board our ships? Do we maybe create this work environment? And what you need to understand, and you were there with me when we did that, but it's a very tough nut to crack because we don't want to make them feel like they're doing something wrong, but we want to make them know that, hey, there's probably something you can do to get better. So it's very different, right?
Yeah.
We don't want them to feel, hey, I'm wrong and I'm a bad person. We want them to realize that, hey, maybe I've been doing this unintentionally. Now I need to change that behavior so that I can create this environment that we all want.
Yeah, and then it's a real challenge because you and I will love to know about the reactions about the participants that went there. But just before, because we need a lot of ingredients to make it happen when we initiate those solutions. Like, how was the support of the stakeholders? What was their role during this implementation?
So I was, like I said earlier, it was very happy, and actually it made my job so easy to have very strong support from the leadership of CSL, all the way to, you know, the senior directors, the captains and chiefs that are involved in this, all the way to the chief HR and chief operational officers. Everybody's very supportive of this challenge of creating a diverse and inclusive work environment. So very strong support. They were actually present at the session. So really it was very strong.
And do you see that the buy-in from the stakeholders make more chances to the events to have success?
I think it's absolutely critical. It is so easy to send a message downward without actually really taking care or really caring about it. But this is not the message that I hope that's not the message that our people got, because the strong leadership support we have with this issue is what is actually making us being able to move the needle. And I'm sure some of our people who are watching this have tried to move that needle of diversity and inclusion. It's not easy. It's not a needle that moves fast. It's not easy to move. But when you start doing these things, and if you start trying to educate your people, educate might not be the right word. When you try to create awareness and you start trying to have this dialogue with your leaders, it really makes a difference. And having the supports of our top leadership was critical. And it still is to this date, because remember that the goal of this session we did was to actually gain this support from our leaders on board. And I'm confident that we succeeded in gaining their support. Yes, we had support from the top leadership team, but these are just few individuals, right? And I'm not minimizing their impact, but really the core of this session was to get our 150 onboard leaders to drive this initiative with us, and I'm confident we succeeded in creating that little buzz with them.
Awesome, and it's congratulations, because it's not easy when we have some subjects like that, and like maybe the audience will be happy to hear if any other blocks that you had during the preparation or during the events, that maybe some tips or something, some do's and not do's that could be helpful for others for creating and developing those D&I events for their companies.
Well, I think my main advice, to be honest, and I'll try and think if I have any don'ts, but my main do that I would advise somebody else who wants to create that type of event is be very mindful of making sure this is a safe space. Like I said earlier, I don't think nobody shows up at work thinking, today I'm going to make someone else's job miserable and I'm going to discriminate somebody, or I still have this profound belief that all of our we call our employees our CSLers. So I do believe all of our CSLers come to work every morning and want to have a great day of work and want to create a great day of work for their colleagues as well. So we wanted this. My main advice is, and that's what we worked pretty hard on, that wanting to create a very safe place for our people, not for them to feel judged, not for them to feel like we're telling them you're not doing things right, but how can we bring to their attention that there might be changes that we need to do if we want to continue to improve. So just bringing them slowly to acknowledging that maybe there are things that we're doing that are not the right things, without making them feel, and that's how can I say, it's a bit of a gray line. It's not easy to find that sweet spot of, okay, I'm not blaming, but I'm making them realize that we need to change how we do some of the things we're doing. But that would be my main advice.
Trying to create a balance between increasing the ownership and without blaming, and I know that it's not.
Sure you have a very safe place, creating a safe environment for your for your participants. Getting your leadership support is absolutely critical. This is not a subject that you can tackle only at the middle level. It has to come from the very top of the organization. So I guess that my do's and the don'ts would be the opposite of that, right? The don'ts would be making them feel like they're doing something wrong, or not walking the talk of what's being said at this session and stuff like that. one thing that was important too is we actually at the end of the session we actually had them all walk out with one thing that they would try and do differently. So we slowly have taken them by hands from the start to the beginning, and not telling them you're doing something wrong, but in trying to bring them what is one thing you can try and do to make sure everybody on board your ship is fully included and can perform their work all the way, for their full potential.
No, that's really interesting, Jean-Luc, and thank you for sharing. And we can see the story from where it started and how you prepared the stakeholder around the events to make it successful, and how you prepared the mindset of the participant to make sure that the message is landing the right way. Now let's go to the outcomes, and let's hear from you a little bit about they went through the event, and how they react, and what some of the impacts that are on the way that start, or that you can feel or see in your organization.
Absolutely. So I said earlier, it's a slow moving needle. So I'm not gonna say that our journey is done on diversity and inclusion. I think it's just starting. We still have so many things we can do to continue to improve, but I'm happily going to start sharing a little bit about what I'm seeing is as moving at CSL. So of course, after the session, we got some pretty good feedback on the actual session, right? So to be fair, I was happy to read that feedback, but I remember thinking, and that's the first good thing that happens. Now we need to start seeing changes, right? So, and to see changes, it was time for everybody to actually walk the talk, and not just, we all were saying these great things in the session and how we want to change some of the habits we have, but now we have to walk the talk. Again, all the way from the top, including our leaders that are ashore as well. So it is difficult for me to say with, by the nature of our business, our leaders that we train are on board our vessels, and also with our current COVID situation, it was impossible for us to go on board the vessels to ensure the safety of our seafarers. So it's difficult for me to observe with my own eyes changes in behaviors and changes of what's happening. That being said, we do have more and more employees who are manifesting some ideas or concerns that they have about diversity and inclusion. We hear about it a lot more than we did a year ago, for example, or a year and a half ago. So I do feel that the topic and the matter of creating an inclusive workplace, or discriminatory behavior not being accepted, is the word is getting around a lot more, right? So I like to think that this has a role to play in this change, because I can say for sure that there's something happening. There's a change in the mindset that's happening. We hear about it a lot. People are talking about it more. People are talking to the shore people a lot more about it too. So we know that there's things that are happening, and we're happy to see that this is a moving needle. One thing that I'd like to talk about is, for everybody again who's tackled this issue, there's the whole there's two sides to that medal, I guess, right? There's the very positive side of we're trying to be proactive, and we're trying to create this very safe and inclusive work environment. And the session we did with you, Naoufel, and LHH was part of our efforts in being proactive and creating this safe environment. Other actions we need to take also is walking the talk and making sure that how do we react when something happens, right? So of course, like every company out there, we have incidents that happens. And I remember having this discussion with our leadership team and saying, we got to be very careful and very mindful of the message we just sent to our 150 leaders on board, and how are we as a leadership team going to react when an event of discriminatory behavior or something like that happens. And I can tell you that we are actually very aware of the importance of that. And we are taking every situation or everything that's being reported very seriously. And we're taking action on every one of them. So I think pair that with the session we did, we're sending a strong message, a message that we want to create a work environment that is inclusive to all. that is going to create, safe and inclusive to all, but also a message that these behaviors of any discriminatory behavior or anything like that is not tolerated at CSL. It will be looked into seriously, and actions will be taken to prevent them from happening again. I think it's
Excellent.
Right? It's finding the balance between
and it's not easy. It's a marathon. So it's something that it's a switch where you can just from a day to another, you will see like all the behaviors are changing. So you talked, Jean-Luc, about people that starting to be more aware and people more open to share with the leadership team and together. Now, my question for you, what are some other indicators? Like I'm talking about recruitment, about promotion, about all those elements that can help to see if the culture is in the way to be more diverse and more inclusive. Is there anything that you can share with us? That you feel that the events and all the work you are doing to build a diverse and inclusive culture are giving results.
Absolutely. So I'll talk about one example of something we're seeing, and I don't want to take credit for it. This is years of work from a lot of people. So it's really not only me, it's a lot of people at CSL who are working to create this environment. And what I was going to say is, you might have guessed by the nature of our business, we're a very male dominant industry, right? So I'm sorry, I don't have the exact number with me, unfortunately. I think we're about 94% of our seafarers are male, and that leaves a very small portion of women on board our ships. That being said, in the last few years, we have seen some of our I'm not going to say our first, but we're seeing more captains, more chief engineers. And I remember earlier I talked about our top 4 leaders on board a vessel. We're seeing more women in these categories than we saw before. I like to think that this is a good indicator that our women are now more and more included in on board our ships and are participating we're creating an environment where they can actually realize their full potential and grow into these very strategic and very essential role of being captains and chiefs and second engineer and chief mates, chief officer. I mean, so really, really, I think this is a huge indicator of, we are moving the needle in the right direction. But again, I want to say this is years of work. This is not just, the result of one session and then a few discussions we've had. This is years and years of work. So, but I really believe that this is a good indication of, we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and this is something that just encourage to continue to work on that. And maybe my last question on the outcomes. How do you feel the support? There was a commitment from the participants to work on it. How do you feel, or how you can describe the support that those participants are getting from their managers to make sure that we are not just one-time action, but it's continuous actions to build the culture?
Right. So at the session, we also had the way we're structured in our company is we have vessel managers positions. So our vessel managers, they're shoreside position, and they are assigned to different vessels, each of them, and they provide support on daily decision making or daily type of issues that we have to deal with our ships. We also have a crewing team, which similar to a little bit similar to an HR team, but for our vessels. So they were all present at the session on the diversity and inclusion. So they're all part of this. They're not just part of the solution, but they're actually key players in creating this environment because they are interacting with these people on a daily basis. So of course, I talk with them sometime, but I can't say that I have a daily dialogue with our captains and our chief. Like they're managing our ship. They don't have time to talk to me all the time. they have to do our core business, right? But they do talk to our vessel managers all the time. They do talk to our crewing team all the time. So having them having them as key players in this training, I'm sure has helped them, asking them the right question, making sure that they can guide them on that aspect as well.
Yeah. So I think, and I thank you to give us, to take us on the balcony to see like the big picture on what's going on and how you start this journey. And I know that it's a journey, and it's not one action. And maybe we'll be landing by asking you, like, what more can be done, and or what we can do differently when we are in our thinking and we have a purpose to build a diverse and inclusive culture.
That's a good question. What more can be done? So I think you can never talk. Well, I'm going to say you can never talk too much about it. So we got to keep the dialogue open. We got to continue to talk about it. I mentioned before two fronts on which we're working. So yes, we have to manage everything that's reported, or any situation we're aware has to be addressed. That's really important. We got to continue this effort. We have a bit of momentum right now. We must continue. We don't, even though it creates a lot of work. It's not easy, and it's not the fun part of being an HR is not to investigate incidents, right? That being said, it's really important. So we got to continue to have this momentum. And on the other side, I think we need to continue this dialogue with our top fours, and we need to bring it down the organization as well, because we are grooming and we are continuing to develop our people who are going to be our future leaders. So we have to think forward. So of course, we want our current captains and chiefs to be very aware of these issues, and to be able to address how they sometimes behave, for themselves. But we want to make sure we prepare our next generation of leaders that in 5 years they're going to be, or even in 3 years, they're going to be in these chairs. They're going to be captains. They're going to be chiefs, and they have to be ready to. So I think what more can be done is just we got to continue to talk about it, like we talk about sales every year, like we talk about finance, or we talk about engagement. We've been talking about employee engagement for years now. So we got to make diversity and inclusion like all these other metrics that we're tracking. We got to make all these other topics that are important to our business, and we got to talk about it every year. We got to make people accountable for creating a diverse, inclusive work environment. We're not there yet at CSL. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
but we're towards making this a business metric, not just something we talk about once a year.
And do you think that the next generation, that you have that are growing in the company, could be the D&I ambassadors? And if yes, what support they are receiving from you to, that it could be in their DNA once they are in the position of leadership?
So I think they should be ambassadors. That being said, I just a belief I have, it's an opinion I have, but I don't think it's a generational issue, the diversity and inclusion. So I don't think it's specific to a generation. So I don't want to think that it's only our upcoming generation is going to solve the issue. That's not true. We see incidents happening of discriminatory behavior in every category of ages, right? So I think we need to count on everybody, not just they are key because they're our future leaders. So we got to make sure that, we're already trying to support them with training, with information. We actually want to provide more and more training on that matter. We've released another training recently about, saying no to bullying on board and stuff like that, and actually acting on it, identifying it and acting on it. That was released a few months ago. So yes, we're trying to train our younger generations, but I'm going to be honest, I'm really aiming for not only them, but I think all of our people on board have a role to play in creating that environment.
Thank you so much, Jean-Luc. It was a really pleasure to listen to the story, a really success story. And I know that still to come in your efforts to build and improve the diversity and inclusion culture in your company. And I'm pretty sure that you will see in the next surveys some key indicators on all the efforts that was done in the last couple of months. Thank you so much. And I think, Dan, we are ready to take some questions now.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for a really interesting conversation, some great insights there. We are going to go to our questions and answers. So for our audience, a reminder, if you have a question or a comment, to please put it in the chat, and we will get to as many of those as we can before our session is up. I did have a question just in terms of the example that you have used for CSL, a fairly large global organization. Many of our audience members, of course, are some of whom do work for large organizations and large employers, but we also have a number of different organizations that are a lot smaller. So a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises, small governments in our municipalities, First Nations, and so forth. And I'm just wondering, in terms of what you learned from your experience, is there any advice or any points that you need to that our audience needs to consider in applying those lessons to their organizations? And either one of you can weigh in on that.
So if I can jump in real quick first, I think even for smaller size organizations, so the initiative we actually did here with the LHH team was specific for our Canadian fleet. So we're talking about a smaller size of our population, right? So I think a vast majority of what we talked about would apply to even smaller organizations, specifically the part about having strong leadership support, right? So if you want to make a difference, you got to make sure that it's not coming from HR, it's not coming from one person, it's coming from the top. It's coming from either your president, your CEO, or your directors, that you're not walking into this journey alone, because this will be a very heavy rock to push by yourself.
Yeah, and I think then, you know, from my perspective, you know, we need to work in the same structure by working on the mindset and you know, talking about the enablers and the you know, the barriers about embracing this D&I culture, and you know, even for small or for bigger companies, it's the same process. It just taking more time for bigger companies because there is a large number of people and maybe more challenges than a small. So for me, it's the same structure. We need to start somewhere and follow, you know, agreed structure to make it happen in those companies.
So so that's great explanation. So what if you have a scenario, it's an employee or it's a leader in an organization, but they're finding that leadership is not there, or that there's real resistance to it? Can you think about any strategies that that individuals can take to make leadership aware, or to encourage them to make this a top priority for their organization?
On top of my head, what I would answer that is find a metric that's really important to your leadership team, and then try and investigate that metrics. For me at CSL, employee engagement was something we already sold our executive committee on. So I didn't have to sell employee engagement as being something important. And when I showed the difference in engagement based on gender, that really shocked our leadership team in seeing, wow, this does affect our engagement. So if you have other data to which you can attach your diversity and inclusion conversation, data that's important for them, that's what I would try to do.
Yeah, and I totally agree. We need to get the buy-in. We need to bring data, and we need to, you know, create a case study that showing the link between a lack of diversity and inclusion and some key elements that can impact the company performance. And at this time, we can have an open to listen to what any initiative can be helpful to take off this resistance and think about what can be the solutions to make the diversity and inclusion more present. in those companies.
And sort of final question for me, can you think, just sort of again putting you on the spot a little bit, but are there other resources or other places that organizations can look to be able to see some of these case studies, to be able to say where are some real success stories? Obviously, you know, we've heard your CSL case, so that's one, but are there other examples or resources that individuals or organizations can look to get advice and even training in this area?
Naoufel, I'll jump in again first, just so we keep our.
Yeah, please go.
I was going to say really quickly, of course, we're working with LHH, but you're right, there are many others. And without naming them, just for respecting, you know, the fact that they're not here with us right now, but there are many organizations out there that are specifically, their reason of being is to represent a specific group of people. May they be LGBTQ communities, may they be First Nations, or so there are many organizations like that in every part of the country, or even on the global context. So I would strongly advise you reaching out to these organizations. They have fantastic resource. They have fantastic speakers that can come to some events, company events you're doing. They can share their stories. They can help you address specific challenge, maybe cultural differences, or like I said, LGBTQ, whatever is your challenge you want to touch on for your organization. I'm almost sure you can find an organism that will help you finding success stories and resources.
And just to add to what Jean-Luc said, I think to be able to take advantage from all the resources, I think one of the elements that companies need to think about it is to create a D&I, like a committee inside, where there is some people who are interested in the topics, and they are diverse in all the aspects of the diversity, are representative of the diversity of the company, that could help to introduce some initiatives and get in or connect with those external resources to build and to help to get more information about diversity and inclusion.
Well, thank you both for that. Some excellent insights, and really, I think you mentioned it here that the more diverse and inclusive your organization is, it's not only something that as citizens and as stakeholders, it's critically important for a better society, but it's also a competitive advantage as well. The more inclusion and diversity you have, the more competitive your organization is in the long haul. So thank you both for that. We're really excited to hear now some questions and comments from our audience. So we'll turn to that now. All right, so we have some questions in the chat. Thank you for sharing those. Our first question here is: while you build inclusion through the team culture, do you have tools, protocols, or procedures regarding social media in the workplace and beyond? Jean-Luc, do you want to start with that? Do you have a social media strategy or policy with respect to
that's a good question. I do not believe we have social media policies that touch on, you know, how you represent the companies in these in the social medias and what type of stuff you can share there and right. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I'm not absolutely sure if we have specifically D&I aspects to that, but I'm going to take a quick note here because that would be really interesting to make sure that we do cover this aspect in this strategy.
All right, thank you. Naoufel, any in the clients you work with or your own organization, do you address that?
Yes, some of them are on LinkedIn as one of the famous for still the professionals. Didn't see yet some where the other social media tools that can be, and I'm encouraging that it's not just a professional. I think we are now connected to all the social media, and it's still not a habit. And yes, it's a great question, because we can reach to more people and reach to those people more often if we are thinking about a great strategy to talk about D&I using the social media. In LinkedIn, yes, I can confirm that many companies has some strategies to work and talk about D&I in their companies.
Yeah, and I think you know, a lot of organizations grapple with this too, not only from the proactive side, but also how do you protect your employees from online abuse, whether it's internally or externally, and that's a very real problem in all kinds of different workplaces or in environments. So I think it's so. If there's anyone here in the session when we get to our open conversation roundtable, perhaps if you have some examples of that, we can hear from you. Okay, next question is how important is it to have board involvement in EDI and buy-in through visible action in their governance?
I would say this is absolutely critical. Like I said before, I think we are beginning our journey in diversity and inclusion at CSL. Well, not beginning, but I mean, we still have a huge way to go ahead. Lots of stuff we still need to work on. That being said, having board support for initiative D&I has a cost attached to it. Real change has a cost attached to it. So of course, you will need support from the higher, from the board at some point. We even see companies now have chief diversity and inclusion officer positions. They measure it as much as they measure sales, and they measure, I'm saying they because I'm going to be honest, it's not something we're doing right now at CSL. We do have someone who's responsible for this, but this is a very recent new position that was created. It's not a chief level, it's more of a specialist level, but still it's a move forward, having someone dedicated to the topic. But I think having your board support is critical because at some point you're going to be asking for resources, and you'll need that traction of metrics that talks to these people.
And I can add, Dan, from the clients we are working with, and the successful stories are when the board and the leadership team are having the buy-in and showing the example, like they are role models and walking the talk. We need to see that there is a connection between what we are saying, between what the initiatives are running for D&I and our own behavior as a board and as leader. So the more we are embracing the right behavior for D&I, the quicker and the best we are seeing change behavior in the entire company. So yes, to respond to the questions, yes, it's mandatory for me from the experiences we have with our clients.
Okay. Next point, many people have preconceived notions based on their knowledge, experience, bias, values, etc. These notions can lead to judgments that are very subjective, not accurate, and often disruptive. What advice do you have to build a strong culture of team members who observe without judging?
So I took a second here just to think. It's first advice is being patient. Like any change that's culture, it's behavior, is not going to happen overnight, right? And I come back to something I was talking about earlier during our conversation, Naoufel and I, about, I think you need to look at the two front we talked about. So you want to be very intentional in how you try and prevent these unconscious bias or these types of behaviors that you're trying to eliminate. So you got to be very intentional in the training you're doing and the awareness you're trying to create. But as I just mentioned, as the person who asked the question stated, these are sometimes not intentional, and the person who's having these behaviors. So how do you react when something occurs is as important as how you try to prevent it. So your reaction to it is really, really important. And there's no good, well, I mean, there are good answers, but what I was going to say, it really depends on these situations. Sometimes it's just something was said, in the cafeteria or whatever, and maybe you just need to address it. You talk to the person, you say, hey, this happened, let's talk about it. We know your intention was not wrong. How can we try and move away from that? And then you address the specific situation. Some other times we have, like I was saying earlier, we have some incident that can happen, or different nature and different types of actions are taken, of course, in this situation. I don't know if I'm answering the question right, but now feel free to jump in.
Not, if I understand the question right, I think my answer will be two pieces. Like the first one is starting with from our experience is for teaching people and making people aware about unconscious bias, like what a conscious bias and unconscious bias, and just this first connection or self-mirror about how I believe myself in terms of bias with the differences, and how I be aware that unconsciously I can have some biases. When I have this first point of view and self-assessment, we need to work with people, because some of them will see some not good behaviors and will avoid to react. Others will react, but maybe not with the right way. And what we want is to create more and more people who are seeing non-inclusive behaviors and react the right way by educating what should be the reaction in this case. So hopefully I answered the questions, but this is was my understanding from the question.
That's a very nice. I just want to say I really agree with you, Naoufel. I think the training part is really important. Like people will say they don't want to do this, or that they don't have these bias, but fact is we all do. We all have these bias, these unconscious bias, whether we like it or not. So just coming to that realization and bringing that to our people, sometimes it's not an easy task to do, but doing it through awareness session or training, or call it whatever we want, but just doing it is a huge step forward in trying to eliminate it.
All right. I have another question here, and then I think we'll move on to our roundtable in a few minutes. But thank you for the session. Thanks for the questions. I'd like to ask about what strategies companies can employ to create a safe space for Black, Indigenous, people of color, and other underrepresented peoples, such as Women for CSL, as they roll out EDI initiatives to support the majority.
Again, a great question. Thank you. I guess the answer is not obvious to this one. For us, creating space, making sure women were well represented into key decision areas was I think a big step forward. So one thing I didn't mention earlier, like we have different organization that helps us in our decision making. Like we have a committee of captains and chiefs, which are our leaders on board. Having women sit at this committee is a really big step forward into making sure they're well represented and their voice is heard. I would say that making sure these groups are represented into decision-making bodies or decision-making positions is important. Same thing we do when we do job interviews, for example. We're trying not to have only, for example, men doing the job interviews, because then you have only men that might share the same bias. So when you try and have a men and a women, then you're trying to eliminate that man-women bias. So maybe in your case, the question was asked was more around Black people and First Nation. Maybe you want to have these people in these critical decision-making processes, maybe job hiring, maybe other decisions that are taken in your organization.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jean-Luc. And what I can add, and to be honest, I think companies that we are working with are still working on those strategies, because it's a new topic, and it's not something that companies were focusing a lot on. Yeah, some tips on that is really that the board need to have the courage to talk about it, to do open discussion about it, and to have some go-to people inside of the companies. I shared in one of your questions, Dan, that creating a committee could really help, not all people will be open to share with us in a big meetings. So we need to create this safe communities, some ambassadors or change ambassadors or DNA ambassadors that could be go-to people. The more we create those spaces, the more people will be open. And I just repeat it again, the more the leaders are walking the talk, the more team members will have the trust to be open and talk about the challenges that minorities, it could be those was mentioned in the questions or others, depending on the specificity of the companies. And I want just to add something. The more and more we see that we have some classic diversity elements, but there is others that start with the pandemic, with the hybrid work and some style of working. And companies start to see that we need to work on those parts of the diversity more than the gender or the color or the religion or sexual orientation or the aspects that we know already for diversity.
Thanks. So one last question, and then we'll open it up to our roundtable. And I'm not sure if you can answer this one, but we have seen an increase of women and persons with ethnic backgrounds moving into politics. So maybe politics, but also public life, whether it's as elected politicians or whether it's as more public officials. Could be CEOs, could be people who have a public profile. What can we do to encourage more of this?
On the public, you mean in the organization? I take it, what can we do in our organization, for example, to try and promote these groups from growing into the organization and getting into these leadership positions?
Yeah. I mean, I think this question is coming from the basis of political life, elected office. But I'm kind of extending it beyond just elected office, but because when you're in a leadership role, you're often in a public role as well. Politics just happens to be very public. Yeah.
So I guess my answer to that is, first of all, I'm for one very happy to see this increase in diversity in our public governance and everything. It's great. It's healthy. I hope it will continue down this road, and I hope it will transpire into the organizations across the country, and seeing more and more diversity in leadership roles. One thing I think we can do, and I'm coming back to the decision making. Who makes the decision about who are the future leaders? We maybe have, in our organization, different types of process where we identify potential successors, we identify talent, we talk about who's going to be our next CFO or our next CTO. Let's go back to the notion of unconscious bias. We're all biased, and we're making these decisions and saying this person can be our next CFO and this person cannot. Is there a bias in this decision? Is there a bias into this assessment that we're doing? So how can we try and eliminate the bias into who gets the chance to be into these decision-making positions? How do we create an environment where this bias we try and eliminate it as much as we can, so that these people who are the minorities have a better chance at being identified as these future leaders that will lead the company or the country in other areas. Naoufel?
Yeah, I think, I think I have one comment to add to what you said, Jean-Luc, and to get back to the public sector or any, I think we were just asking women for years to fight for their rights and to put themselves on the front to take those positions. But I'm still, and it's my point of view that men's have a big responsibility to be advocating a real change and to be encouraging and pushing for that. So it's as always, we need to build it together. It's not just women's responsibility. I think men's need to work on their bias and need to push for having more women's in high leadership positions.
That's a great way to conclude this portion of it. Thank you both for that. So at this point, we're now going to move on to our open roundtable. So those of you that want to stay and have a bit more time with our presenters today, this is your chance to now put on your cameras or your mics, or you can stay invisible and send us messages through the chat. I will moderate the session, and the best way to do that, we've got about 40 people on the session here, is if you do have a question, then please use the function at the bottom of your screen that says reactions. It's got the little smiley face with the plus next to it. And there's a button there that says raise hand. And then I will be able to see that you have raised your hand and you wish to speak. So I'm going to open that up now to our audience. Yep.
Sorry, Dan, I just shared a document to be downloaded and to read for those who will not continue with us. They can just click on the link and they can, it's a great adequate survey that can give more thoughts about our discussion.
That's great. Yes, that's in the chat there. So thank you for doing that. All right. So have we answered all your questions? I don't see cameras on yet or hands up. That's great if we haven't. I'm sure there's lots of different dynamics here because this is becoming a critical piece to many organizations' missions, their visions and values, which is all good. But everyone's going to come at it a little bit differently. I do see Cynthia there on the screen. Hi, Cynthia. You can unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thanks. Thank you so much, Jean-Luc and Naoufel, for this session. It's really fascinating to hear how EDI is working its way through the shipping industry in your particular organization. I'm really curious to know, I think just about safe spaces. I think they obviously have to look different at every organization based on the culture that's already there. And I think that in concept, we all have a sense for what safe spaces feel and look like. But I'm really curious about what that actually looked like in your particular organization, the specific strategies that you had to employ to create that space, both like before, during, and after these workshop sessions, right? Because I know that, or I'm assuming that also getting buy-in for people to go to these sessions must have also been in itself perhaps an interesting journey. So just curious to hear more about safe space creation.
Right. A challenge. Thank you for the question, Cynthia. I like the question. It's not easy. Again, I feel I start every answer with that, but it's a topic that's not so easy to tackle, right? So creating a safe space. How do you create a safe space? I got to say, when we did the session with LHH a year ago, just to give you some context, one thing that's really interesting at CSL is our Chief Operational Officer. So the person who oversees all of our operation globally is a woman, which is great because it's one of our, again, we all have our different challenges. For us, we're tackling this one a little bit more, women representation, and having her leadership on top and having her drive with this initiative is helping us. That being said, out of the 150 people we had at the conference, I don't know exactly how much, but you can think that a large majority of them were men. So I think creating a safe space comes from making them feel not alone, right? So when we were tackling unconscious bias, we were saying, we're not talking to you, Naoufel, or you, Dan, and saying you have an unconscious bias. We're saying we all have one or several. Now let's talk about it. And you're not alone in this. And I come back to this fact that we were really intentional. We worked with LHH a lot before the session and making sure that the way it was presented, the way it was said, we never wanted them to deliver a message like, you guys are doing something wrong. What we wanted to deliver is, as a system, we might be doing something wrong, not you as a person. Now, how do we change the system and not you personally? Well, you're part of it, right? But it's a fine line, I'm going to say, Cynthia. Difficult to find. Fine line to find between tackling these issues that are very personal, because you're asking me to change my behaviors. But making it safe, I guess, is how do you make me not feel like I'm alone in this? Now, feel free to jump in and help me out here. But
yeah, no, I think you describe it right. And Cynthia, just to add to what, and give you a little bit what behind the scene from the work with Jean-Luc for CSL or for other companies, it's also to help and to communicate a lot about that. being different is okay. Being different is we have the right to be different. And what being different means, like I'm not different than you, I'm different like you. You know, there is no one way to do things. So the more we communicate about that, the more we talk about that, the more we can see what is, or we define what is a safe space is. And for most the clients we are working with, space or safe space is where I'm not feeling judged. I can be myself. So we need to have the ingredient to prepare this, but accepting that all the differences in way, and sometimes as I say it and I repeat it, maybe I'm repeated a lot, sometimes we can accept the classic way of diversity, but we have a difficulty to accept that working differently on a project can be something that I need to work on, and I have biases on how people are working. So we need to go deeper on those differences to accept them and make them, you know, okay, so now I can talk, I can be myself, and I can share. So hopefully we answered your question, Cynthia.
I just want to build on what you said, Naoufel, because I think it's really interesting. You mentioned, you know, where I'm not different than you, I'm different like you. And my previous job was a bigger company, and I was sometimes facilitating workshops around diversity and inclusion. And I like to introduce some of them by saying, I'm the opposite of diversity. I am in the most represented gender in this company. I am the most represented age group of this company. I have the typical employee tattooed in my head, on my head. That being said, I am a minority, like you, like Naoufel said. I have elements of either my personality or there's something in me that's, you know, I am different too. And then we would start by sharing something that makes us different. And some people, it was more visual, like, you know, I'm the only woman in the room, or I'm only Hispanic person in the room, or whatever. And for some other people, it was more personality-wise, like, hey, I like country music, or, you know, I like this type of stuff that not a lot of people like. And it was interesting because then it would put everybody in the zone of, hey, wait a second, we all have these differences. Some of them are more visible and more easy to tackle, but some others, you know, they're more invisible, but still they're there.
And maybe a last thing to add to what Jean-Luc is, you know, create also that even with all the efforts we are doing from a personal point of view and company point of view, it's okay to have still some biases, because it's human. Yeah. So we should not stress about it. We just be, you know, when we are aware of, we are doing something about it, but that's okay.
We normally even say it's okay to have biases, and it's impossible not to have biases, even though you want to. Even though you want to try and eliminate them and not have, you will have them. The key is how you cope with them, how you work around them, how you surround yourself with other people that maybe don't have these biases, and they can help you see your angles and help you in your decision-making process.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Hey, Cynthia, before you go, if I don't have another question or comment, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, because I know you're at Vancouver Island University, and you work with students who are transitioning or preparing for the workplace. Maybe tell us a little bit about the sorts of things that you see in doing that, in helping those students to prepare for different workplaces, or the types of workplaces you're working with and how they're addressing this.
Yeah, so I am a community engagement faculty for the MBA program at Vancouver Island University, and we have at this point 99% international students. And so it's a really interesting challenge as we connect students with employers, because there are different understandings about what a work environment looks like. There are different understandings around professional communications, around conflict management, around relationships between colleagues, and your relationship to your boss in terms of your interactions. And so I think some of the things that we have found to be useful are working with students to understand what a Canadian work environments, what the scope of Canadian work environments look like, and traditional values that might be representative as a part of the Canadian work environments. And we also help them see that whatever work experience they bring in, we help try to link that to experiences that employers are looking for, to help create that link to show them, hey, this person actually has 10 years work experience and the exact same thing that you're looking for. And it's in a different context, it's in a different country, and it's a different industry, but it's that same expertise. So I think just in terms of skill set and corporate culture, those are two of the pieces that we're looking at.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, if I can comment, I think it's a great work that you are doing, because you are preparing the next generation of team members and leaders who will be working with that already prepared and more conscious about those challenges. So yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree, and it is part of the toolkit of leadership going forward. It's not just about your understanding of finance or organizational development, but this is a key part of working with people. It's the people side of organizations. Ultimately, organizations are people, and these are key components I would view as for leaders going forward. So thanks for thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being our impromptu third speaker here.
Well, I'll just throw in one other quick thing. One thing that we're also learning that we was a gap in our programming is teaching students about Indigenous history and culture and how that relates to business here, right? Because they are not from this country. Like myself, I am not from this country. And there is another learning curve that has to happen in order for them to be meaningful contributors, and not only to their businesses, but also to decolonization and reconciliation here. So that's something that's really new on our radar with just pulling in some of our alum who are Indigenous and working with Indigenous organizations to figure out how do we thoughtfully support students through that learning process too.
That's great. And we had a terrific session this morning on the Indigenous economy from 3 economic development organizations led by First Nations. So watch that in the recording if you weren't part of our session this morning. So thanks for highlighting that too. Any other questions that folks are thinking about or examples of what your organization is doing? You can get some quick free advice here from some folks who are working in this field. All right. Well, yep. Hey, Jolene. Go ahead.
Hi. Sorry, I joined late. I was also just doing a presentation like you guys were to a class about multiculturalism and Indigenous and ecotourism. I'm an Indigenous woman. I serve on the VIA board. I serve my community. I'm elected to council. So I feel like I get asked all the time questions about diversity and inclusion and what inclusive practices work. I think everyone's go-to is forming a committee. So I apologize if this question's already been asked, but do you think that's a good practice? And how do you go about that? Who's included on the committee, and how long do they form a committee, or does it transition to something else?
Yeah, Jolene, I can. Oh, go ahead, Jean-Luc. No, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. I was going to say, I hope we were going to say the same thing, Naoufel. We didn't align on that one before. We'll see. I was going to say, I think committees can be very good, but there are some conditions to them being very good. I would say the first, their mission has to be very clear. They need guidance. They need help, probably from someone like you, a leader in the organization that can help them and guide them. One lesson learned I've lived personally in the past, I'm not sure this is applicable to every organization, but we had different committees. Again, this is not at CSL because CSL is a small company. I have a hard time building all these committees because we're smaller, but in a bigger company, we had a committee for women, we had a committee for the LGBTQ plus, we had a committee for First Nation, we had a committee for war veterans, we had different committees. And I think one of the mistakes we did, I'm saying this in all humility, of course, but the members of these committees were members of this community, which is great. But looking back, if I was to do that again, I would open up the doors of these committees to anybody who wants to support these specific groups. We had people who wanted to get involved because maybe they have a family member who's in this situation, who's a member of a war veteran, or their spouse or a friend or just a colleague, and they wanted to get involved. So my quick advice on committees would be yes, but provide good guidance, provide resources. Also, they will be asking for resources very fast, so make sure you can respond to that. And open the doors to anybody who wants to be part of it, and not just members of the represented or the community group that they're representing.
Yeah, it's this is what I was want to flag, Jean-Luc. It's you know how to create a community. This is not something that I can like bring something new. You create a community. It could be for 1 year, and then you can ask people to join it. Like, this is the classic part. But I think the risk is to avoid that this community start to be like the only community or part of the organization that speaking or talking about D&I or having the initiatives. It should be open to everybody. And I think one thing that I want to flag too is who are part of it. So we will open it to everybody, but what is the process for choosing those people? We need to walk the talk when we are choosing people to not to be biased while we are creating a D&I to reduce the unconscious bias. And I think one thing that I will recommend for those people who are in the community or create the community is that they have already the trust of people. They are go-to people. So we are not seen as another committee, another one in the list we have, but oh, okay. So people who are in, I know them, they have a background. They did something for the minorities. They show that they are advocating change. And then they could be not in a visible diversity, but they are in their way of working. They can encourage me, and I get back to Cynthia, to have this space, safe space that I can go to. So this is a little bit of tips that we can share with you, Jolene. And yeah, we can take more time to talk about it, but I was just to complete what Jean-Luc say about what's really not more to flag than what to do. Because what to do, we know how we can build a committee of it.
Right. Naoufel, you mentioned something I think is really important, and I just want to build on it. You got to be very careful with this. One of the risks with creating a committee is you're putting accountability on them, and you should, because they're a committee and they should have some part of the decision making. But you got to be careful not to remove accountability from your leadership team as well. This committee will have a specific mission. Maybe it's to promote it, create events, create awareness. But your leadership team remains accountable for creating a diverse and inclusive work environment. You're not removing accountability from the leadership team. One of the things we did in that other organization I was working in is every committee had an executive committee member at the table. It was the exec sponsor. And the role of the exec sponsor was many things, but two things I want to highlight is first, helping the committee get resources. I talked about resources before. I do believe we need to inject money in what's important for the organization. So the executive committee representative had this mission of, hey, we want to do this event. We think we need $2,000 for the event or whatever. And the exco, the executive committee member would say, okay, let me go back. Let me take this point, bring it to the decision-making body, and I'll come back to you with an answer. So that was their first mandate. And their second mandate was sort of bringing what was discussed at the committee to the senior leadership team so that they remain accountable of the issues that are in the organization and the opportunities that they must tackle. So I just wanted to highlight that point, Naoufel, you mentioned. I think it's critical. Keeping everybody accountable, not just the committee.
I'll just add one thing, because putting my hat on, I'm a member of the board of the Canadian Museum of Immigration in Halifax. So it's a federally appointed board. So number one, the composition of the board is a major priority is diversity, regional diversity. So obviously I sort of represent the West Coast, but there's representatives from different groups, different identities and cultures across the country. But to your point about leadership, it is a responsibility, it is a board priority, and therefore it's a responsibility of our CEO to lead this change through the organization. So there's various groups and subgroups that are working on what they call JEDI. So the J is justice, as well as equity, diversity, and inclusion. So there's different groups within the organization that have a responsibility, both from the staff perspective, but also because it's a national museum and it's telling a story of immigration in Canada in all of its forms, positive and not so positive. It's a priority of the CEO. So the CEO she doesn't delegate that to anybody. It is the CEO's responsibility to report on that at every meeting and in our corporate plan. So there's an example in the kind of the government crown corporation piece that it's not just sort of a delegated responsibility, it's an organizational responsibility as well. Does that help answer your question, Jolene? Any thoughts from you?
No, thank you. And I really liked that what Jean-Luc added near the end about not to assign the accountability to the committee and to not remove the accountability from leadership. So thank you so much. That's I'll have to go back to this recording and rewatch the entire presentation, but happy I got a question and that was very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to hear that.
All right. Any other final comments or final wrap-up comments from our presenters today? I know we've given you the floor. Oh, we do have a question here from Doug. Doug, go ahead and ask it. Either put your camera or your microphone on, and please go ahead.
I think you are on mute, Doug.
Sorry about that. I clicked it, but I guess I missed it when I clicked. I might have missed it. I had to step out for a phone call briefly, but was there any reference to how you handle this in future job postings when you're looking for applicants and making reference to diversity and inclusion? I'd be just curious, our presenters, what thoughts they have, how should the job posting look?
A good question. There are different ways I think you can promote your efforts in diversity and inclusion in your job posting. You can literally just talk about it. You can talk a little bit about your culture. One thing I want to highlight is you also can be very sensible about how the job posting is written. There even exist softwares out there that are actually using artificial intelligence to scan how the text is written and will highlight a little bit like a grammar corrector, but it will highlight ways that you are written that specifically favors, for example, men versus women, or will specifically be more attractive to men or women, depending on who you're trying to attract as a population. So being very mindful about how it's written, just the words that are used, and sometimes the how you describe the candidate that you're looking for, you might not realize it, but maybe you're describing a man, for example, or a woman unconsciously. So just being very mindful about that. And I think it's also a very good idea actually to promote your diversity and inclusion efforts and culture in your job posting. It will speak to a lot of candidates.
Yeah, and just one comment on what you said, Jean-Luc, and you will describe it. We should not see gaps between the sentences encouraging diversity and the way we are creating the posted. So we are recommending to companies to use expert companies that are very good on the market to help creating posted that are more diverse. And I think the time we can have people inside that can build the right posting and not exclude anybody when we are writing, the best is to go to experts to make sure that we have the right posting.
Doug, does that help to answer your question?
Yes, I think that was useful information, and I appreciate the feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have a question here in the chat. Have you seen a preference for learning when bringing real change to existing cultures? For example, is there a strong preference for visual tools as opposed to written or oral communication? Or is there a mix or a balance of all of those forms of communications? What's been your experience?
I'm not sure I'm going to answer the question, so please don't hesitate to tell us in the chat if I'm going in the wrong direction or anything. But I think what I'd like to say is the best way to tackle this issue is experiential. Like, it's a change in the mindset. It is not it's not learning where to click when using Outlook. Like, if I want to learn how to do a macro in Excel, I'll Google it and I'll find a tutorial and I'll change how I do it. I want to change how I perceive things, how I behave. I have to live an experience that's going to change something within my personality or something. So I'd like to think that you cannot just post posters and your culture is going to change, or you can't just send emails and you can do these things. I'm not saying they're not good. They help, but you also have to create moments or events that will be experiential to a group or to specific individuals. And that's where they might have this aha moment and maybe change something in how they behave or change how they perceive things. Naoufel, and that's a little bit what we did with you, right? When we did the winter conference with our leaders, we tried, and we had talked about this before, but at this event, we tried and crack the nut and say, hey, maybe you have these bias, and we try and have this experiential event where they would self-reflect on their own with their colleagues. And I don't know what you
Yeah, I think it just we need to use as a diverse way of communications as the diversity of the receivers. So the more our communication pipelines are large, the more we can reach the different people and how they receive and how they are impacted with messages. So that will be one comment that I can add to what you said, Jean-Luc. Hopefully it's answered the question.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments anyone want to ask? You go ahead and put your mic on or write it in the chat. We still have time. All right. Well, I think everyone would like to have a afternoon wake-up beverage or something to get ready for the next session. Maybe a coffee or something else. Yes. Thank you so much to both of you, to both Naoufel and Jean-Luc for joining us for this really enlightening conversation. Thank you for being open about your organizations, but also really being proactive and progressive in your thinking on this really important topic. I know that for us at VIU, at VIA, Vancouver Island Economic Alliance, that we're really committed to this as well as part of our mission as an organization. And so we hope to be continuing to do more work and maybe call upon you for some advice, but also those that are joining us here today. So we have a number of, before I go, I do want to mention that both of you will be getting a gift from Island Good. Island Good is our program to help highlight and to promote island-based businesses, beverage, food producers, a variety of different companies. So we have a gift package that'll be coming to you soon. We can't present it to you in person, but it will be coming to you soon. So you have something to enjoy there. Want to thank CPABC for their sponsorship of this session and for their support of the summit. And then finally, we have our next session, which starts at 3:30 Pacific. It is a keynote presentation by the Premier British Columbia, the Honorable John Horgan. So you'll want to join us for that. And then at 5 o'clock, we have a reception. It is a virtual reception, but we encourage you to come and and pour your favorite beverage, and we will chat and connect in a virtual way. So, and of course, an exciting list of events happening tomorrow. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. That's good. Keep good company, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.